Right. So, something I'm curious about. So, as much as you can speak to, because I'm sure the process that you guys have is, unique and proprietary to what you guys do, but how does one even begin to come up with a sound for their piece of technology or for their brand? Like, on what creative plane do you even start at to do this?
Yeah. What I like to do is kind of just let somebody talk. And really just talk about their product and maybe even talk about what their visual design is and why they chose their visual design. Because I think there's something in that. Because again, like I said, it's five senses. So whatever sound comes has to be complementary to the visual that's already in place. Or in a perfect world, nothing has been created yet and they create all at the same time. But if I could get them to talk about why they came about looking the way that they did, that's definitely something right there. And then another thing that I like people to try is, what don't you sound like?
Yeah.
Because sometimes
Oh, that's
that's
interesting.
easier to think backwards, like
Yeah.
I don't want, heavy metal music. I don't want something too bubbly. I don't like pink. Seriously, like anything could work. And you put all this stuff together. It's not like just taking one word, but I love adjectives. If I can get people to
Hmm.
start talking adjectives, I can start to formulate what I think that means and give some
Yeah.
options. And then it's not like just the world, but I can present something and say, okay, these are what I took from this. And if nothing else, like that could be one of those things like they see what I came up with and go, wow, that's not what we stand for at all. And then we're like, okay, well then let's sit down and figure out how, because this is what I got from that. How
Yeah.
can we kind of reassociate you in a more efficient way?
Yeah. No, that's really interesting process that you have. I like the working backwards concept of it because I think sometimes, I definitely would probably start overthinking right off the bat, and I'd probably get bogged down in like I'd probably get bogged down in the adjectives of it, to be quite honest. I don't know, because I'm trying to think if we went through the process being like, what does Red Fox AI sound like?
Mm-hmm.
Even going as far as like, what does it have for dinner? What is it like to do in its free that persona part
Creating
of
a
it?
persona. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, which I know goes directly into helping create the sound or the sonic
Mm-hmm.
brand that you're trying to develop. But it's hard,
Yeah,
and I think the working backwards concept, because I think people have an easier time going, oh, I know it does not sound like that.
right.
There's no, comparing it to something else that's already out there
Mm-hmm.
versus trying to come up with something completely new from thin air. That's a really good strategy. I like that.
And another thing too is like, if you have something out there that you've heard and you go, I really like that, then I would be like, okay, well, let's talk about it. Why do you really like that? Because obviously we can't create that exact same thing, but
Right.
if you can figure out what triggered you to like that so much, then you can work from there to figure out what association specifically went with your brand. Or it could just be what Nick liked, not what Red
Yeah.
Fox AI sounds like. And that's another thing that's really tricky is like if you just leave it up to a group of people and say, I love Gwen Stefani.
Yeah.
Okay, well, is that relevant? you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
No,
find it's helpful to have a third party kind of filter out some stuff.
I like that approach, and I would imagine that the hardest part is probably coming up with that initial persona or that initial design, because I'm sure for somebody who's musically inclined like yourself, it's easy enough to probably go to a keyboard or go to something to start generating sounds, but
Yeah, it's
it's that
different. Hmm.
right. It's that design element of what exactly are we trying to go for here. I mean, I always thought it fascinating watching some the behind the scenes of different movies that were made and the sound design, and they talk about how they just use the most random everyday objects to create like a specific sound effect. Going back to Star Wars,
I was
there's a
just going to mention
yeah,
that. Okay,
like
go ahead.
like the OG, of course, 1977 Star Wars, and the objects that they had to use to make the laser beam sound that would shoot from the blasters and the lightsaber sound, because all of that was new. And I just thought it fascinating how they just grabbed real world objects to do that, and it ultimately just formed into this otherworldly thing that now everybody can associate with. I just find that all fascinating.
Well, and also, is this John Williams? Gosh, I can't remember now. I think it is. Saving Private Ryan. That's John Williams, right?
Don't quote me on it. It probably is. He's done so much.
I hope I'm right.
I know Steven Spielberg directed that, so it had to probably be John Williams.
There's that Steven Spielberg's done without John. But anyways,
Right.
I think the brilliant thing that whoever composed that did was the beach scene. And the beach scene, the opening scene on D-Day, when they come out of, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, but like when they come out of the boats and they go up on the beach and they're fighting and they're doing all this stuff, there's no music. None. For like 15 minutes. All you hear is like the pelting of the bullets, like hitting the helmets, and like it's totally intense. And I'm sure they brought it up in the mix and all of that stuff as well, but it was more intense because nothing was in the way. And then when they got up onto the hill and they were finally like over that part, the music came in and it made you go, oh, you know, like you didn't realize you're like holding your breath for 15 minutes.
And that's interesting because sometimes no sound is just as powerful as having sound.
And that's the other thing that's very important when brands consider their sound is don't just grab this because it's a fad or you think that it's like the next best thing. Like, okay, we need sound. Go.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't happen overnight. You really have to think about it. And there are places where sound should exist and there are places where sound shouldn't exist. And that's different for every single company.